By noon, water was pouring under Maren Whitlock's front door like the house itself had finally learned how to cry, and when I kicked the door open with a toolbox in one hand and panic in my chest, I found her standing in the kitchen with soaked socks, shaking hands, and a smile so broken it scared me more than the flood. Before I tell you what happened next, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, because sometimes the smallest act of help can uncover the deepest wound a person has been hiding in plain sight. I had lived next door to Maren for 11 months, long enough to know she kept her curtains half open, her porch swept clean, and her voice calm even when her world looked like it was held together with tape. Her sink, however, seemed to fall apart every few weeks, always during bright afternoons when the neighborhood was alive with lawn mowers, school buses, barking dogs, and people too busy to notice one lonely woman calling the same neighbor again and again. My name is Calder, and at 41, I had become the kind of man who fixed things because broken objects made more sense to me than broken people. I repaired fences, patched gutters, tightened loose cabinet hinges, and told myself that was enough connection for a person who had already lost too much. 2 years earlier, my engagement to Bryn Mercer had ended in the parking lot of a courthouse after a small accident, a large misunderstanding, and too many proud words neither of us knew how to take back. Since then, I had kept life simple. Work in the morning, home by early afternoon, coffee on the porch, tools in the garage, no promises, no questions, no attachments. Then Maren moved into the pale blue house beside mine with a moving truck, 3 cardboard wardrobes, and a silence around her that felt carefully practiced. She was polite but distant, pretty in a tired way, with copper hair usually clipped at the back of her head and eyes that seemed to apologize before she ever spoke. The first time her sink broke, she knocked on my door on a Saturday morning while I was sanding an old rocking chair. She held a wrench she clearly did not know how to use and asked whether I knew anything about plumbing. I fixed the loose trap in 10 minutes, and she thanked me with fresh lemonade and a look of relief so intense I almost asked whether the sink was the real problem. I didn't. The second time, a month later, the faucet handle came off in her hand. The third time, the garbage disposal jammed on a carrot peel. The fourth time, the pipe beneath the sink loosened again, and I noticed the fitting had not simply worn down. It looked like someone had twisted it, not enough to destroy it, just enough to make it fail. By the 5th time, I had started recognizing the pattern. Her calls always came in the middle of the day, usually around the hours when families gathered for lunch, when delivery vans stopped on driveways, when children shouted from sidewalks, when everyone else seemed to belong somewhere. That afternoon, as I knelt in the water spreading across her kitchen tiles, I tried to keep my tone light because I could see her holding herself together by force. I tightened the shut-off valve, shoved towels against the cabinet base, and said, half joking, "Your sink breaks every time you're lonely." I expected her to laugh, maybe roll her eyes, maybe tell me I thought too highly of my repair skills. Instead, she went completely still. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, catching the water on the floor in bright silver streaks, and when she looked down at her soaked feet, her voice came out barely above a whisper as she said, "Maybe it does." Those 3 words changed the whole room. They made the dripping faucet sound like a confession. They made the little blue house feel less like a home and more like a place where someone had been quietly drowning without making a sound. That I should have asked her then. I should have set down the wrench, pulled out a chair, and let her speak. But fear has a strange way of dressing itself up as respect. I told myself she deserved privacy. I told myself neighbors fixed sinks, not hearts. So I made another joke, dried the cabinet, checked the pipe, and pretended not to see the tears she wiped away with the back of her wrist. But when I carried the wet towels to her laundry room, I passed the hallway and noticed a row of framed photographs turned face down on a narrow table. Not removed, not thrown away, just turned down like looking at them hurt too much. One frame had slipped slightly, and inside I saw part of a smiling man in a navy coat standing beside Maren under a bright spring sky. When she caught me noticing, she hurried over and straightened the frame face down again. Her cheeks flushed, not with anger but with shame, as if grief itself were something she had failed to clean before company came. Over the next few days, I started seeing things I had been too careful to notice before. Maren watered the same potted herbs every morning even though half of them had already died. She set 2 mugs on her porch table and only drank from one. She bought groceries in pairs, 2 pairs, 2 rolls, 2 small steaks, then let 1 portion sit untouched until trash day. On a bright Wednesday afternoon, I watched from my driveway as a woman in a cream cardigan stepped onto Maren's porch and left a sealed envelope tucked beneath the doormat without knocking. Maren opened the door after the woman left, saw the envelope, and sat down on the steps as if her knees had forgotten their purpose. I crossed the yard before I could talk myself out of it, asking if she was all right. She smiled the way people smile when they are begging you not to make them explain. She said it was only paperwork, but her fingers crushed the envelope until the edges bent. The next time the sink broke, I did not come with jokes. It was a clear afternoon, the kind with clean blue sky and sunlight bouncing off every parked car on the street. Maren called at 1:17, and I was already halfway across the yard by 1:18. The leak was small, almost harmless, just enough water to gather beneath the cabinet. I tightened the fitting, then sat back on my heels and said, "Maren, did you loosen this?" Her face changed so quickly I knew the answer before she spoke. She looked toward the window, then toward the floor, then at me with a terror that made her seem much younger than she was. She admitted she had not meant to flood the kitchen. She had only wanted a reason to call someone without saying the real sentence out loud. The real sentence, she said, was that she could not stand the quiet after her husband, Beckett, died. Beckett Whitlock had been a school music teacher, a man beloved by everyone who knew him, the kind of person who remembered birthdays, carried groceries for strangers, and filled rooms with easy warmth. He had collapsed from an undetected heart condition during a charity run on a sunny morning 17 months earlier. Maren had been standing near the finish line holding a paper cup of water and laughing with another teacher when it happened. One moment he was waving at her, the next he was gone from the world so completely that every ordinary sound afterward felt insulting. Birds still sang. Cars still passed. Neighbors still grilled burgers. Sinks still ran. She told me people came around for the first few months with casseroles, cards, and careful voices. Then their lives continued, as lives must, while hers remained nailed to one terrible morning. She had moved to our street hoping a new house would give her a new start, but grief had followed her into every room and sat beside her at every meal that I listened while sitting on her kitchen floor with a wrench in my lap, feeling the old locked door inside my own chest begin to open. I told her about Bryn, about the accident that had not killed anyone but had destroyed our trust, about the argument that grew larger than the truth, about the pride that made me let someone I loved walk away because apologizing felt like losing. Maren listened without judgment. For the first time in years, I said out loud that I had not just lost a relationship, I had helped bury it with silence. She did not tell me it was not my fault. She did not offer easy comfort. She simply said that loneliness makes people do strange things, and shame makes them do even stranger ones. Outside, the neighborhood mail truck rolled past, sprinklers clicked across lawns, and sunlight poured over her kitchen floor as if the world had been waiting for both of us to stop pretending. After that day, I still fixed her sink, but the visits changed. I taught her how to tighten the fittings herself, and she laughed when water sprayed across my shirt. She taught me how to make Beckett's favorite tomato soup, though she cried when the basil hit the warm pot and filled the kitchen with memory. We began having lunch on her porch twice a week, always during the day, always simple food, always with no promise beyond that hour. She told me about the cream cardigan woman, Beckett's sister, Tessa, who believed Maren had abandoned Beckett's memory by moving away from their old town. The envelope had contained documents about a scholarship fund in Beckett's name, and Tessa wanted Maren to sign over control because, in her words, Maren had become too fragile to handle anything meaningful. That accusation had cut deep because Maren secretly feared it was true. She had stopped answering old friends. She had stopped playing the piano. She had stopped visiting the school where Beckett once taught. A broken sink, she admitted, had become easier to face than a broken identity. The unexpected turn came on a bright Friday morning when Tessa herself arrived at Maren's house while I was repairing a warped porch step. She looked polished, stern, and exhausted, carrying grief like a shield sharpened at the edges. She saw me there and misunderstood everything. In a cold voice, she accused Maren of replacing her brother with a handyman neighbor before the scholarship papers were even settled. Maren went pale, and for one awful second I thought she would shrink back into apology. But then she stood straighter. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She told Tessa that Beckett was not being replaced, because love was not furniture and grief was not proof of loyalty. She said she had been lonely, ashamed, and frightened, but she was still Beckett's wife, still her own person, and still capable of honoring him without disappearing beside his memory. Tessa's face cracked then, not with defeat but with pain. She admitted she had been angry because Maren's move made Beckett feel farther away, and blaming Maren was easier than admitting she missed her brother so much she could barely breathe. That morning became the first honest conversation either woman had allowed in months. They sat together on the porch while the sun warmed the steps, and I stayed nearby pretending to measure a board while quietly witnessing two grieving women stop punishing each other for surviving. Maren signed the scholarship papers only after adding one condition: the fund would support lonely students, not just talented ones, especially those who ate lunch alone, transferred schools after loss, or needed someone to notice them before they broke in silence. Tessa cried at that, really cried, and for the first time since I had known her, Maren reached for someone without hesitation. Later, when Tessa left, she hugged Maren so tightly the envelope bent between them. The porch seemed lighter afterward, as if the house itself had exhaled. Weeks passed in warm daylight. Maren's sink stopped breaking, partly because I replaced the faulty fittings, mostly because she stopped needing disasters to ask for company. She joined a community music program at the school and began helping children practice piano during afternoon sessions. I started volunteering to repair instruments and broken music stands, though I knew more about screws than sheet music. One afternoon, I found her in the school auditorium, sunlight pouring through high windows, playing the piano with a group of students gathered around her. Her hands shook at first, then steadied, and when the melody filled the room, I saw a version of her that grief had hidden but not destroyed. She looked alive, not because she had forgotten Beckett, but because she had finally allowed love to become a bridge instead of a locked room. My own redemption came quietly. With Maren's encouragement, I wrote Bryn a letter, not to win her back, not to reopen anything, but to apologize without defending myself. I mailed it on a bright Monday morning and expected nothing. A week later, a small card arrived. Bryn thanked me for finally saying what should have been said years ago and wrote that she forgave me. I sat on my porch with that card in my hands, feeling something unclench inside me. Maren found me there and did not ask too many questions. She just sat beside me with 2 cups of coffee and let the silence be kind instead of empty. That was when I realized healing did not always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it came as a neighbor sitting beside you in daylight, not trying to fix the past, simply proving the present could still hold warmth. By late summer, the scholarship held its first small ceremony in the school courtyard during a golden afternoon. Students played music under a white canopy, teachers wiped their eyes, and Tessa spoke about Beckett with a voice full of both sorrow and gratitude. Maren presented the first award to a quiet girl named Eloan Price, who had lost her father and stopped singing until a teacher noticed. When Eloan hugged Maren, I saw tears slide down Maren's face, but they were different now. They did not look like surrender. They looked like rain after a long drought. After the ceremony, Maren walked over to me, took my hand in front of everyone, and said she had spent so long thinking loneliness was a weakness, but maybe it was only the soul's way of knocking on the wall, hoping someone kind was on the other side. That if this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before this story ends, please leave a meaningful comment about someone who showed up for you when you were too proud, too hurt, or too afraid to ask for help, because your words might remind another person that they are not as alone as they feel. Maren and I did not rush into calling our bond anything grand. We let it grow the way steady things grow, through porch lunches, school concerts, repaired steps, shared laughter, and honest memories. On the first anniversary of the day her kitchen flooded, I went next door with a new brass faucet wrapped in brown paper. She laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter, and then she cried, and then I cried too. The sink worked perfectly after that, but we kept meeting in her kitchen anyway, not because something was broken, but because something had finally healed. In the bright afternoon light, with 2 mugs on the table and both of them full, Maren smiled at me and said the house felt quiet again, but no longer empty. And for the first time in years, I understood that love does not always arrive to replace what was lost. Sometimes it arrives gently, carrying a toolbox, tightening what has come loose, and reminding 2 wounded hearts that even after the worst flood, a home can still be saved.